I had a very, very quick glance at the Irish Independent, a fairly conservative newspaper from what I understand, and they have a report talking about how Gabriel Zucman, who is a tax academic, has said that Ireland remains the world's #1 tax haven. I think the multinationals that are funneling their profits through there altogether totaled something like £85 billion last year, or euros, I'm not sure. But it's in the 80 billion something euros of profits that have been named as going through Ireland. Now, how much of that business was actually done in Ireland, who can say? I would imagine it's a fraction. Using accounting techniques, there are ways of booking the profits in Ireland where it is basically a low tax regime in the European Union, as opposed to the Virgin Islands and these other places which are also extremely low tax regimes, but questions do start getting asked when you are openly using a tax haven. At the same time, Ireland is basically a tax haven, it just happens to be in the European Union. So that was an interesting story, and in terms of what you could bring into the debate in relation to that is that at the G7 meeting in Biarritz this weekend, they were talking about the Amazon, as in the rainforest and the fires that are going on there. Obviously Ireland weren't present at the G7 meeting, although there were some non-G7 countries there. Emmanuel Macron talked about creating a fund to help finance the rainforest to protect it. I think I saw a range of different numbers. 20 million that Macron promised, 10 million promised by the UK government. I don't know if that's going to be included in the 20 million. But then it also said that the UK government was putting in about $1 billion or $1.5 billion over 10 years. Now, what does that mean? Putting in could mean, let's say, 150 million a year. But if they are using financing techniques that allow you to invest money in order to have the money returned to you with a profit or something like that, then they're putting money in, but they're doing it in such a way that they're not actually giving the money away. The money is not actually going to be used in a way where people are being paid to do something. It's going to be an investment, and that investment will then be sold on to other people who can have a part of it, and basically it will turn into a return. So the priority will not be simply protecting the rainforest. In fact, most of the money will be multiplied and returned to its owners. The priority is to create a paper market for financial services, and the Amazon is a sort of collateral that is just the motive to put the money in order to then take it out. Interestingly, separately, I saw that the Greeks are about to end their capital controls, which they did in order to protect their economy, when the IMF and the Troika and the European Commission came in and told them what to do. They were lucky. Well, no, they weren't lucky. Ireland had the same type of treatment from the European Union. However, Ireland are a massive tax haven, as the Irish Independent have said, unlike Greece. In Greece, they tend to store their money in the sea, I think, the wealthy oligarchs, in order to not get taxed and things like that, from what I understand. So tax avoidance is large in Greece, endemic, and in Ireland, individuals pay their tax, but large corporations use it to avoid tax. So these different things were going on, and as I said, Greece are about to get rid of their capital controls, and that will be something which the IMF and all these other countries will be happy about. They had to do it in order to protect themselves, and now they are liberalising again. And we'll see if the same thing repeats, the same problem as before. The IMF itself are choosing a new leader, and the understanding is that the Europeans, who normally pick the leader of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund that is. Now, just to be clear, the International Monetary Fund is an organisation that lends money to countries that need it, developing countries. There's a woman called Kristalina Georgieva, who's a Bulgarian economist who is the CEO of the World Bank. So she doesn't run it, but she's the CEO. The World Bank is run by somebody called David Malpass, who I believe is a Bear Stearns economist who was chosen by Donald Trump. So the CEO, Kristalina Georgieva, the Europeans have picked her. They had a deadline for an internal selection process. The UK were invited to participate in that. They asked for an extension of 24 hours in order to nominate George Osborne, the former Chancellor, who was big on austerity and now is the editor of the Evening Standard, as well as a host of other jobs, including being on the board of the company that owns The Economist magazine. George Osborne was going to be nominated, but in the end the UK didn't enter his name into the internal EU selection, and it looks like they will nominate him separately. And that's quite interesting because, of course, the UK used to participate in the EU selection process, which then afterwards led to the nomination and the actual naming of the head of the IMF. But now what's going to happen is it looks like they're going to send their bid in separately, and that's going to be something where they will ask for Donald Trump to help. And so in terms of the cleavage, the gap between the EU and the US, and the UK being very much in the middle, having been previously on the side of the US but working inside the EU, now they are quite visibly departing from all of that. And George Osborne, who is a known Remainer, he campaigned for the UK to remain inside the European Union. He has obviously done a deal with Boris Johnson, where he backed Boris Johnson to become the leader using his newspaper, the Evening Standard. And Boris Johnson is now backing Osborne to become head of the IMF, which lends to developing countries. Now, countries don't get to vote who becomes the head of the IMF. Only managing directors of the IMF get a vote. There's about 28 managing directors. And yes, as I said, they will all get a vote. So how that turns out, who can say? But of course, the Americans will have some clout, and they will be able to try to influence the 28 managing directors, some of whom will obviously vote for Kristalina Georgieva. I mean, it looks like it's going to be a two-horse race. But I wouldn't be surprised if Osborne got it, because it's all backroom deals, isn't it? And it's not hard to have your arm twisted if the Americans come up to you and say, if you do this, if you do that, we will penalise you. If you do this, if you do that, we will help you.